Their pathetic, ridiculous insider swamp game in Sacramento has already cost the state of California billions of dollars in revenue that we are not getting back. These absolute reckless idiots, they have no interest in the actual consequences of their ridiculous far-left ideology. This is what you get from 16 years of one-party rule. Hello everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. Very busy week last week, the start to the year, crazy Venezuela, Iran, lots going on around the world, here at home in America, ICE, Minneapolis, a lot going on. We're going to touch on many of those themes today in the show. I have Jen Horn joining us with some updates. Of course, busy week in California last week. The Palisades fire, 1 year anniversary, I was there for that. Gavin Newsom, State of the State. I responded to that. Our own announcement about $250 billion of fraud from our initial investigation. So a huge amount of stuff to get us started. And also something that takes us back to a crazy time, which was the pandemic and the lockdowns here in California. There's a really, really shocking story. If you're not aware of it, you need to stay with us for this. Pastor Mike McClure is joining us from Calvary Chapel, San Jose. If you can believe it, still in court with the county and the state of California, all these incredible examples of harassment and government tyranny because they had the nerve to keep operating despite the lockdowns. They were right, of course, but the millions of dollars in fines that they've been fighting, the fight is still going on. 5 years later, they're still being sued. It's absolutely outrageous, and we're going to get into all of that. But I want to start today with another story that really blew up last week in California, and it goes to the heart of everything that's going wrong in California. That is this billionaires tax, so-called. So this is something that just captures so perfectly the stupidity and the failure of 16 years of one-party rule, and above all, the corruption of that. So I want to explain what's going on here. One of the unions, SEIU, they are pushing a ballot initiative in California because they say that there's not enough money in the healthcare system in California. A lot of the workers they represented in the healthcare in healthcare in California. No, we need more money for healthcare, they're saying, because President Trump and the Republicans in Congress have cut healthcare spending in the One Big Beautiful Bill by removing the Obamacare subsidies that were put in place during the pandemic, right? Where is the pandemic still here? No, of course not. So of course it's right that this is the big problem in California, which is the spending that was unleashed, this sort of avalanche of spending during the lockdowns. And remember, it's not the pandemic, it's the lockdowns, because the spending was only necessary because of the lockdowns, which were unnecessary. So I don't want to call it pandemic spending, it's lockdown spending, and the lockdowns should never have happened in the first place. So you had all this money to compensate people for the lockdowns, and then now, and in California, all of that spending has been baked into the budget. That's why they've basically doubled the budget in the last 5 years in California. So this is one part of it, which is healthcare. Nationally, Obamacare subsidies, they've gone away. California unions say that means we need more money for healthcare. The total amount that's disappearing for California is about $1 billion, actually. The Legislative Analyst Office in California has done that calculation, just over $1 billion, right? That's the total loss to California from this policy. And they're saying we need a ballot initiative to get that money back because they say we need $100 billion for healthcare, okay? They are proposing a tax on billionaires. They say it's only going to hurt 200 people in California. They're going to pay 5% of their wealth. So there's so much wrong with this on so many levels. Number one, remember that number $1 billion or so dollars lost through the Obamacare thing? Guess how much they're spending in California on free healthcare for illegal immigrants? $13 billion. So why don't we start with that if you're short of money? But beyond that, what's the impact of this? This is a proposed ballot initiative. It's not even on the ballot. They need to get about 1 million signatures before May. My conversations with Sacramento insiders is that they don't even think they're not even really serious about getting this on the ballot. They're using it as leverage. This is how it works in the swamp of Sacramento. They propose something, it's often the unions, they propose something really extreme and they threaten to put it on the ballot, and then they use it as a leverage point in negotiations with the governor over his budget Gavin Newsom just published his budget. We'll be talking about that with Jen Horn a little bit later in the show. And they want certain demands from Gavin Newsom in his budget, because the governor publishes the first draft of the budget in January, and then in May there's what's called the May revise. And then in between you negotiate for certain things. The legislature negotiates, and of course the unions, because they control everything. They're the puppet masters. So this union wants a bunch of stuff to be put in the budget. In order to use leverage, they say, we're going to file this ballot initiative that's going to really hurt our economy, drive business out of our state. But if you give us what you want in the negotiations, we'll take it off the ballot. That's what the game is. And it's a very well-trodden path that happens in California. Meanwhile, because of the way that this particular ballot initiative, this proposed ballot initiative is drafted, it has a retrospective aspect to it, which kicks in if it gets on the ballot and if it's voted for by Californians, then the actual force of it goes right back to the beginning of this year. So you've got a whole bunch of the most successful people and entrepreneurs in the history of the world based in California have said, we can't take that risk because it's going to affect control of our companies, like the Google co-founders and so on. And so you've seen a mass exodus just in the last few weeks of people leaving California. Business owners, entrepreneurs, they're some of the most successful people we've seen who pay the most tax, because that's the other part of it. They say we need more money for all this spending, and the rich have to pay their fair share. The rich already pay half the income tax nearly of California. Nearly half the income tax revenue for the state of California comes from the top 1%. It's been very much like that for ages, because that's the way it's set up now. So they're already paying the highest tax rates in the country by a long way. And now they want to do this, so people are leaving. And the estimate is, just in the last few weeks, with the threat of this, not the reality, just the threat of it, $1 trillion of wealth has left the state of California. Billions of dollars of actual revenue have already left. It's gone. It's too late. Even if their stupid negotiation thing means that they don't put this on the ballot in the first place, their pathetic, ridiculous insider swamp game in Sacramento has already cost the state of California already billions of dollars in revenue that we are not getting back. These, I don't want to curse, but absolute reckless idiots who think their stupid games in Sacramento are all so clever. They're so up their own you-know-what that they don't care. Just, this is what you get from 16 years of one-party rule. They have no interest in the real world, the actual consequences of their ridiculous failures and far-left ideology. That's what we're dealing with in California. So this is just a perfect symbol of it. Of course, we have to stop this ridiculous tax so it doesn't do even more damage. But more than anything else, we got to dismantle, take a sledgehammer to this whole rotten, corrupt system, this swamp in Sacramento, the unions, the far-left Democrat politicians, all of them just conspiring to destroy the most beautiful, the most amazing state in the history of the world, because that's what California is, and they are ruining it, and we got to stop it. All right, our friend Jen Horn is here. Any news, Jen? What's happening?
Oh, nothing, Steve. It's been a really slow start to the new year. Lots of news, actually. And that protests have been kind of the word of the day. And here in Los Angeles, we have not been immune to those. We had a lot of anti-ICE protests that were going on this weekend, but something even a little more unusual and interesting. And that is in Westwood on Sunday, there were a group of pro-Iranian democracy demonstrators who were out by the federal building. There were actually a lot of them. I would say probably somewhere up around 1,000 people. That area has a big Persian area, and so a lot of people had come out to.
So this is supporting the protests in Iran.
In Iran, right, and
pro-democracy. Right.
Mm-hmm. And so they were out there, and it was peaceful, certainly spirited, when a U-Haul truck decked out with, let's just call it pro-Ayatollah messaging, pro-Iranian regime messaging, comes pulling into the crowd, and thankfully didn't end up hurting anybody. I think maybe one person got injured, but the driver was then pulled out of the car by the protesters. The LAPD jumps in, and for as much flack as law enforcement has been getting, especially lately, the LAPD was able to get in there and protect the driver. even though he really was in a terrible place to be, he was able to protect the driver and get him out. They were able to apprehend him. We don't know much about the driver yet at this point, but simply that he was supporting the Ayatollah and the regime that's in Iran. But a strange story. It didn't get a lot of play in the mainstream news media, and I thought it would be interesting just to chat about it. Anytime you hear a truck driving into a crowd, usually there's a lot more coverage of that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's got all these different, confusing aspects to it. The fact that you have a protester attacking a pro-democracy rally, but because it's Iran, and with all of these things, I just think that I mean, we don't know, but I do want to make a general point. Maybe it's not relevant to this particular case, but it is interesting to me how, just broadly, Donald Trump sends people into crazy positions, because he's now so strongly, for the first time for any U.S. president in memory, associating himself strongly with the protesters and saying that there'll be a price to be paid if they're hurt. And we'll see what happens. I know there are very serious conversations going on in the White House just this week about all of that. So we'll see what happens. But the fact that the president is right, so suddenly, in classic fashion, so we must be against it because Trump's for it. It's just. I've seen that all over. Just as another tiny, I mean, we'll get back to the U-Haul thing because I've got a couple of questions about that. But it is hilarious to how I've seen in the last few days, um, on the Greenland issue, right? On the Greenland issue, it's suddenly you've got all these people on the left who are basically now coming out in favor of white colonialism, which is what that is. It's Denmark colonizing what Greenland, and no, we're for the colonialists.
I had a listener who put it so beautifully. I've referenced him probably like 8 times now. He called into the program, to the Morning Answer last week, and he said the one thing that's been amazing to watch about Trump is how he has put people who are liberal and on the left on the razor's edge, basically scrambling to defend, for instance, Nicolas Maduro, right? That was the story last week. You had the Biden administration come out and say, well, Trump would never be tough on Maduro because he admires dictators, right? Well, then when Trump goes in and arrests Maduro for the crimes that we believe he's committed, well, now poor Maduro. I mean, you really do have people who are playing moral shape shifting, I think, because they have such a bad case of Trump derangement syndrome. And I actually think that that's what makes this story another element to this. And that is that once again, police are under fire. And no matter what you think about this woman, Renee Good, in Minneapolis and what she was doing and if she should have been there or not, the problem is she put herself in the middle of a federal law enforcement operation. She blocked in federal agents. And now we have a lot of criticism on these agents. There was another story locally where a police officer went into a Starbucks in Southern California over the weekend and was handed a cup with a pig drawn on the side of it. So this anti-law
Wow, I
enforcement
hadn't heard that.
stuff is really there. They're facing so much. But here's a perfect story of where the police went in and did the right thing when it was a very chaotic situation in Westwood with this U-Haul driver literally attempting a terror attack on the crowd. And do we hear one of our elected officials, have we heard from Karen Bass or Gavin Newsom, applauding the job that the police did to diffuse what could have been a really bad situation? Think about it. This U-Haul driver was clearly trying to kill people when he drove into the
Well,
crowd.
do you think that was what it was? Was he ramming the crowd, or was it
He was
like
trying
he
to, I
had?
mean, anytime you drive into a crowd like that, you're asking for trouble. And then when he did, you've got people who are now trying to pull him out and who knows what, kill him, hurt him. And the LAPD was able to take care of that situation with all of that chaos going on. And do we hear a word in celebration about it from electeds when it would be a great time for that? Not a peep.
Well, I'm just catching up on the story, and I'll make sure I do.
Yeah, it's
Um,
been interesting. We've gotten a lot of it this morning on local news, but it really hasn't made it too much to the national media.
yeah,
And I think it should. It's appropriately placed anytime you have
but
this kind
that's
of
the interesting aspect of the story, which is that actually it shows that crowd control, these volatile situations, incredibly easy for it to go wrong, and we all see
right.
examples of that. But here's when I guess we could say when it went right, because
That's right.
actually it didn't turn into some really really bad conflagration where people got hurt. Is that
And I
right?
think
No, were there any injuries at all?
there was, I think, one person injured, but it wasn't serious, and this could have been a really bad situation. So the fact that it actually it did not have the amount of bodily harm that could have been possible, we should be celebrating that. And I think that's really the job of good leadership right now, Steve, is that if you're going to come out and if you are going to complain about police and law enforcement, if you're going to complain about ICE agents, when you get an example of them doing it right, you should also be doing that. That's responsible. Otherwise, you're gassing up a fire for what feels like a civil war that's brewing. And it's not responsible to pick and choose what we celebrate and what we highlight.
Yeah, interesting. Just one quick thing back on Greenland, if I may. There was again, because of what you see in the media, you see in the media that, oh, Greenland, Trump's trying to invade Greenland or whatever, which is,
Right.
ridiculous. And the thing is that, first of all, just a couple of points. One is many presidents have made the exact same point that President Trump has, which is that they would, appreciate, be good for Greenland and for America to have Greenland in some either some kind of relationship with the US because of the vital strategic location, the minerals, all of that stuff. So this is not new. It's just that, as usual, it's only President Trump who's actually trying to do something. Other people talk about it. Other presidents have talked about it. He's actually trying to do something about it. Second point, the way you'd sort of read it in the media is that everyone's in Greenland is up in arms and how dare Trump. Well, no, that's not the story at all. In fact, there's a really interesting, but this is in the Financial Times, which is not exactly some, hard right MAGA publication. The Financial Times, I read it over the weekend, had a story which is that in Greenland, both political parties are actually the people that they're fed up with is Denmark. And they actually, what they are wanting to do is have direct talks with the US without Denmark in the talks. And Denmark's insisting on getting in the middle of it because Denmark wants to hang on to their colonial possession. But actually, the Greenland political leadership is interested in talking to America and wants to go ahead without Denmark. You don't hear that anywhere.
You don't. And you just hear about how Trump wants to go in and steal everything, but they don't talk about the financial ramifications and the ways that the people of Greenland could actually benefit
Of course.
from this idea. And so it doesn't surprise me that there has to be at least a few people whose interests are piqued by saying, well, maybe the old way isn't working for us anymore.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's move on. So it was an incredibly busy week last week. We had our fraud announcement, me and Herb Morgan, the state controller candidate, who I've been working closely with. $250 billion, our estimate of the fraud in California. Califraudia was our report on Monday. On Wednesday, I was up in the Palisades. We're going to get to Spencer Pratt in a minute because I met Spencer up there. We were both participating in the They Let Us Burn rally. So that was Wednesday, marking the 1 year anniversary of the LA wildfires. On Thursday, Gavin Newsom gave his State of the State address, which let's not get into that. It was totally delusional. He was saying that unbelievable that California is now a policy blueprint for the rest of America. That's his phrase.
Right.
So I did a point by point rebuttal. If people want to see that, that's on my social media. I did that up at the Palisades, actually, by the way, because what a perfect symbol of his total failure. Then on Friday, this is what I want to get to you with now, Jen, because we haven't talked about this before. And this came out on Friday with so much else going on, didn't get much attention. The budget. He published his budget, Gavin Newsom. What's in that?
Yeah, he's got a lot of money that he's asking for and not a lot of accountability. And I think that is the underlying theme with Gavin Newsom. And that is related to what he said during the State of the State. Other than him just lying, incredibly, he has driven California into a deficit rather than a surplus. And now he's asking us for him to entrust him with more money for all of these projects that are not going to benefit Californians and put us, as you like to say, Stephen, I love to always quote you on this, put us back on the top of the list for education, for quality of life, for economic issues. All he's doing is patching problems, more healthcare, more ways to fight what President Trump wants to do, less about helping the taxpayers who are struggling to stay here. And what's got a lot of people riled up is this talk about the wealth tax that I know you're going to be covering, this millionaires tax. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. This is not how you save a state that is literally dying under this Democrat leadership.
Well, because, I mean, we had the U-Haul trucks
Yeah.
twice now because you obviously the story we just discussed in LA, but the larger number of U-Haul trucks, the story that they published. They do it every year. Yet again, California, the state with the largest number of one-way trips on U-Haul trucks, people leaving the state. And just, I mean, you're right. The way I always put it is that it's now 16 years of one-party rule. We've just entered the 16th year of one-party rule, and you've got 2010, Jerry Brown was elected, and you've got the thing that is so kind of, it's just unbelievable the way I sometimes put it is it's literally true. It's not an exaggeration. It's not political kind of rhetoric. We are top of every list you want to be the bottom of, and bottom of every list you want to be the top of. It's just very simple. Highest cost for gas. Let's not get into it. I want to talk about the budget because, amazingly, when you've got all this going on, he actually increased spending by about $40 billion. Like, what are you talking about? Like we have the highest taxes in the country and the worst outcomes. And that's what you see, that's what I was getting at with the fraud announcement with Herb on Monday in San Francisco was it gets to the central question that people are asking, which is how is it possible that we pay the highest taxes in the country and feel like we're being squeezed and taxed to death? People are leaving as a result of it. And yet we have the worst outcomes on everything.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Well, fraud is a big part of the answer.
I think fraud is and misspending. And I think this is what got me more than anything about seeing the governor's budget, especially butted up against his state of the state, where you really felt like he was gaslighting you, saying that he had these problems solved or that homelessness was getting better. That's always a big one, that all of these things were being helped along by programs. And then the next day he asked for even more money. And so we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to pay a lot of money to live here, we expect to be at the top of those lists. We want the best schools. We want the best roads. We want the best opportunity. We are not getting that. So it's a really big ask. Again, another huge chunk of money that he's asking for with this budget for this fiscal year. And how is he going to spend that? He is not made himself the good steward of spending because there has been no oversight in 16 years. There has been no accountability. And so if you're asking for more money, well, tell us what we're going to get for it. And he was not able to do that during the State of the State. And certainly those two things go hand in hand, and they're really important to understand. We will pay more if we get more. But right now we're getting nothing, and we're being bled literally out of the state by this huge amounts of money. They don't seem to comprehend impact all of us.
It's amazing as they said, we don't have the words. I mean, the delusion, the shamelessness, the kind of total detachment from reality. Oh yeah, more money. We need more money. We need more. What are you talking about? We already spend the most, tax the most, take the most, and everything's the worst. So they have tested to destruction the idea that spending more money leads to better outcomes. It's the exact opposite.
It really is. We need someone who can go in there with real plans and fix the real issues that California has. And there are real issues, despite what Gavin Newsom wants people to believe. And that's why I thought last week was such an important week for California. And I know that you've talked about this already, but I really think it's important to underscore and tie everything together. Your announcement about all of the possibility of fraud in the state, totaling $250 billion, maybe more than that, almost an entire year of our state budget. That's a problem. Then you have Gavin Newsom come out and say, well, we've solved all these problems. We have all of these plans. Well, to me, that takes fraud, and then it marries it with ineptitude. And then the big piece de la resistance on Friday is asking for more money.
More money.
Yeah, I mean, it really is all connected, and it's part of the California experience. And I feel that people are seeing this and hearing this and going, well, wait a second. Everybody else in the country is paying $2 for gasoline and I'm paying $5.49. What's going on here? Or my kid's school is failing my child and we're paying all of this money in property taxes and they want more by repealing Prop 13. At some point, people wake up and they realize it's time to try something else.
Yes. Well, that point is this year.
That's it.
I've just got a very strong feeling about it. All right, let's just move on to one last story. And I touched on it earlier. I was up in the Palisades on Wednesday for the anniversary that they. By the way, just one thing that really struck me, being part of that event, the 1 year anniversary event, and it very much led by the community in the Palisades. Even the name of it, the fact that they called it they let us burn. Just think about what that means. That's how they feel. That is an incredibly intense thing to say about your political leader. They let us burn. But that's how they feel. And the thing that really struck me, I mean, I've been there many times over the last year, and I've really been involved, and I've been laying out, I've been criticizing the response, and I've been laying out alternatives. So I've been engaged in this story because it's so important, not just for LA, but for what it says about our whole state and our failed leadership. But even I was really taken aback by the strength and intensity of the rage and the contempt for Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. I was off the charts. This is not a Republican, this is a Democrat area.
I think when you were on the radio show, I shared with you, and I should send you this footage. It was one of our men on the street for Salem News Channel went to Palisades and just talked. I mean, no political agenda, just talking to people about what their struggles still were, what their situation was, what they lost. And I can't tell you, probably the most powerful one that I listened to, and I listened to a lot of them, was a woman who said, they let us burn. They let us be destroyed. This was a total failure. And she says, I'm telling you that as a Democrat who voted for Gavin Newsom has destroyed our state. That's hard to overcome when you have all of the anti-Trump sentiment and, all orange man bad that runs through California. When you have somebody who says, hey, Gavin Newsom has ruined things. Karen Bass on her watch has ruined things. These people lost everything. And when you ask what happened here, I don't think it was an intentional fire set by the government, but certainly it was ineptitude in the evacuation, the failure to pre-deploy, the failure to fix and fill reservoirs, the failure of anybody to be ready to go. And I think I've said this to you before, Steve. That's fine. Sometimes stuff happens. Sometimes mistakes happen, even catastrophic ones like this. But the fact that we don't have a leader that has stood up and acknowledged all of that instead of just covering their own rear ends, pretending that there wasn't a problem, that's an issue. You could use this as a moment where you say, all right, this is what went wrong. This is what we're doing to fix it. And I've been talking to former LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva. I've been talking to a lot of people, and I say, okay, today, how is our evacuation procedure going now in these fire areas? How have things changed? The answer is it's getting worse. No one is fixing anything. So they may not have intentionally let this burn, but they are not fixing it. And certainly at this point, you have to think they're enjoying the fact that they're able to go in and start buying up property, which is only going to make it harder to evacuate people because you're putting in these huge multi-dwelling units in replacements of neighborhoods. This is a problem that's not going away for a long time. And unfortunately, the people that we have elected are not really intent on fixing problems. They're intent on profiting from problems.
Yes. And the other, the just quick thing is that, as well as all of those failures of the immediate the emergency response and the response since, the other thing that came out so powerfully was almost every single, I don't want to say every single one. I mean, there was a lot, like 2.5 hours, 3 hours I was there. I mean, I would say nearly every speaker said that this was preventable. It was a preventable disaster. It was avoidable. It was preventable. So that speaks to all those years of policy leading up to it. The brush, failure to clear the brush, the focus on protecting this ridiculous, the milk vetch plant, for the failure to put out the Lockman fire properly because of the environmental regulations around the endangered plant, etc. They all, it wasn't just once the fire started, they let us burn. The fire itself should never have started.
Did you hear about the zero zones?
No.
Okay, so this is just a little add-on to what you just said. I should have brought it up to you earlier, but zero zones are now being proposed or actually put into place, I think, in all of California, but 18% of it, because they're in it's now being enforced in areas where you're in fire danger, which guess what, is most of California, right? You're in some kind of fire danger zone. So almost, I think everything, but let's just say 20% of California could be under these restrictions. And the zero zone means that within 5 feet of the perimeter of your house, you can have no plant life. No trees, no petunias, no cabbage, no gardens, no nothing. They want you to rip it out because they say that is what causes fires, is having that vegetation close to your house. When the science always clearly says that fires are started by embers that
embers
are
in the roof.
Right. It has nothing to do with your vegetation. If anything, freshly watered vegetation can sometimes help your house. So you've got all of these people now who are having to pull out their gardens in an effort to get insurance. And people are getting fired up about this in California. They've gone to UCLA. They've collected their evidence saying that this is not what causes fires. Meanwhile, the state won't even clean up their own forest areas, but people aren't allowed to have their petunias. It's unreal.
Really, really interesting. Let's follow. And also, just quickly on that, there is a role for what they call defensible space, outside the perimeter
Fire
of
breaks.
a
Yes.
community, right? Fire break, yes, but like right by your, no, it's the,
It is so symptomatic of how stupid California leadership can
yes,
be. And
very,
it's
very
always
interesting.
something we have to do, never something they have to do.
All right, so let's get to the person that announced his bid for new leadership in LA, Spencer Pratt. I was there when he did it. It was funny. I was with my colleague from my campaign, and we were filming things, and he's filming me and whatever. I was talking to people, and Spencer Pratt came on, and he was speaking, and I just said, just film him. And he did. And like almost like 10 seconds after I said that and he started filming, Spencer announced his bid for mayor of LA. And my colleague said, wait, did you know he was going to say that? I said, no, I just thought that Spencer Pratt is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and he is interesting, and he has been interesting over the last several months. I was so excited to see this. For a while he was wearing the Spencer Pratt for governor. He's always talking about Newsom, and I think you and I even had the conversation like, maybe not governor, but man, the mayor's race needs a good candidate. We don't have one yet. And now we do. I'm excited. I think he's not afraid to say things. If you've looked at his website, which is already very funny, it's called mayorpratt.com. And if you look at the front page of his website, it's his picture that says Palisades resident and Karen Bass's worst nightmare. If you can't just appreciate that someone's going to get in there and tell some truth and shake things up, I am so happy he's in this race. And I do think Karen Bass should be a little bit scared today because of Spencer.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I had a nice chat with him. He's great. We had, he's, and just for those who didn't see it, he's very serious, very thoughtful. We all know his background in entertainment, so he brings all that to the table. But he knows what he's talking about in detail, in great detail. Secondly, the sort of simple focus of his campaign, which is just fight this corrupt machine that's been running LA into the ground, not just on the fires issue, as we saw, but homelessness and everything else, is very simple and resonant. And it's actually reminded me very much of what I'm talking about for California, which is we're both outsiders. Neither of us have run for office before. And actually that is what we're doing, which is running against this failed, corrupt machine in Sacramento and Spencer in LA. So final point, he's a registered Republican. He's made that clear. It's not a partisan race in the sense of party labels. And, good luck. I mean, I basically endorsed him then and there. So I was excited and I still am. And actually, I think that you're right. This is going to be a really interesting one to watch because he's got the fight that we need.
Yep. And he doesn't have the political strains, the political machine around him. That's why these outsider candidates like you, Steve, are so intriguing, I think, to a lot of people because you'll shake things up. You'll have fresh ideas. There's going to be stuff that comes to the table that maybe more career politicians aren't able to bring. And so I think the fact that, and I think a lot of people underestimate Spencer Pratt because they look at him and go, ugh, a reality star. But here's the thing. He knows how to deliver. He knows how to make things fun, which is what Trump does a lot. And that was successful for him. But he's also a poli-sci major. He's also very well educated on the issues and the failures that went wrong. That's a dangerous combination. He's not going to be one of these puppet politicians that he's running against like Karen Bass. So game on. Let's bring it to
Game
2020.
on. You're right. Exactly.
I'm excited.
All right. Thank you so much, Jen. We will see you very soon.
Thank you, Steve.
Joining us now, Pastor Mike McClure from Calvary Chapel, San Jose. Pastor, great to see you today. I just want to start by asking you to tell the story of what's happened. It's an unbelievably important story and an outrageous one that not enough people know. So go right back to the pandemic and pick it up there.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve. Our church located in San Jose, California, Calvary Chapel. We had the pandemic. You remember it started in February or January, that time of year in 2020. Then we had March with our governor, Gavin Newsom, who had the shutdown order, restriction order. You can only have so many people in church. You had to wear masks, social distancing, all that. Then we had we've been meeting outside like most churches in California, along with Jack Hibbs and about 2,000 other churches. We opened on Pentecost Sunday in May, and that was against the governor's orders. But then we had injunction, and other churches, there's a lawsuit. They allowed it and went against the governor's order, saying it was not restrictive. Then by August, we started getting fines. So Santa Clara County in California here, they're the first county to shut down and all the restrictions. So we had people working for them that showed up, started fining us for anything that was a violation of Newsom's orders or the county's orders, which would be including too many people in the room, people hugging, singing. It was about, I don't know what they, $500, $1,000, $5,000 a day. Then they would tape these the fines a day. So they would come about $5,000 a day on average. And they would put these fines up so you couldn't even see, and our lobby became dark. So they'd come inside. They had full access to come in and see. So there'd be prayer meetings, and they'd come in and they'd count the people, and they'd have their charts. And really it was, I mean, they were definitely harassing us, threatening us. And we didn't stop. So they gave a restraining order against myself and another pastor, in which we ended up violating. Then we went to court. We had a few days in court. They began, the judge, with wanting us to go along. I had asked if we could just do what they're asking, and realizing that, this was not a law. We were violating it was simply just a mandate. And so, he had no jurisdiction or ability to really he tried to coerce us. And I ended up, just sharing with him, I want to honor him. But at the same time, the county was hiding the suicide numbers. So everyone was dying of COVID, even car accidents. It was pretty crazy. And we were trying just to meet the needs of the people who were literally committing suicide. And one of these new now members of our church was on the hotline. So for the month of October in 2020, they didn't answer any of the suicide calls. And at that month, there was over, I think, 14,000. I have the record of it for that month. And they didn't answer any of those calls. And so I was telling the judge, I could prove in 30 seconds that our health department here doesn't really care about people's lives, but the church does. And so we just want to minister to them. We're not trying to, get people sick. There's no evidence. And they had come in, and they actually put a geofence around the church. The county had called OSHA against our school. We had a lawsuit. So we've had, just looking at the records here, it's been 5 years, 5.5 years, 2 federal cases, 2 state cases, 2 administrative cases, 7 appeals, and it's still going on. And so we have not gotten to the bottom of it. They fined us originally, my understanding, it was up to over $4 million of all those
When you add it all up.
When you added it all up. And we, were fined more than the entire county combined.
Did you pay those fines?
We did not.
Good.
We have been appealing them, and we think they're unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And, we haven't. So at this point, they have lost all of those areas which are in the fines. The reasons for fining us are been thrown out. Like, you could gather, you can't restrict gathering. But there's one left, and that's the forcing people to wear masks, which we made them available, but we didn't force people to wear masks. So that's $1.2 million. And we were, the Ninth Circuit was going to take us, and they had actually told the county if we got into the Ninth Circuit court, they would lose. And then the judge basically said, I'm not going to take you in. They wouldn't let us in, rejected us. We went to the state level, and the Supreme Court, state of California, rejected. And so we appealed with Jay Sekulow now, and along with our team, Advocates for Faith and Freedom, to the Supreme Court. So they just filed a few weeks back to the Supreme Court for just what's left of all these fines that they've given us is $1.2 million over the not requiring face masks or enforcing face
I
masks.
mean, it's just so infuriating. I mean, look, I just do a couple of quick things on my, where I'm at on this, and then I want to, get really understand, what this has all cost you and what you're still fighting and how we can help. So first of all, everyone needs to understand that Santa Clara County, as you said, was the first in the nation lockdown, and I did a lot of this on my show because I was the first person to call out these lockdowns because I could see it happening here. It started here, right where I live. I live in the Bay Area. I'm just outside. I'm in San Mateo County, just nearly in Santa Clara County, and so the public health director there, a woman called Sarah Cody, Cody, Sarah Cody, she pushed all this. And I've done a huge amount of investigating around this. She basically took off the shelf she previously had prepared a report when she was 20 years ago in the wake of 9/11. What's the emergency response in the event of a bioterror attack? Right. And that's the plan that she took off the shelf and pushed. It had no connection to this particular disease. I mean, it's an outrageous thing. There was no justification for any of it, none of it. And at the same time, right here in the Bay Area, in San Mateo County, I think Stanford is in San Mateo, I can't quite remember, but right on the border, basically, in Palo Alto, Stanford University, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and John Ioannidis, and so on, all the people, the kind of rebel epidemiologists right at the beginning, who right here in Santa Clara County did a study that showed right at that time, March 2020, at the beginning, showed that this whole lockdown thing would not work for COVID because of two things. One, actually, it's much less fatal than the numbers that they were pushing, vastly less fatal for most people, totally harmless. And of course, we all know now the mantra, pre-existing conditions, very overweight people, elderly people. Yes, they're at risk, so we have to protect the vulnerable. But for the vast majority of people, it's not a problem, or not a severe problem. And secondly, that the disease is far more infectious than there had previously been realized. So any attempt like this with these stupid masks that don't even stop the virus, because it just makes me so angry just to talk about it. Anyway, I laid all this out in March 2020 on my show. I was the first to put Jay Bhattacharya on TV. And we did all this, and the president was listening. And I remember I said that night, we're heading to a position where the cure is worse than the disease. That night, the president retweeted that. It was still called Twitter back in those days. So I've got a long history here, and it's just making me so angry to hear this. And the fact that you're still fighting this 5 years on is obscene. Right. So you've got the 1.2 million they're still trying to get from you. These court cases, where's Gavin Newsom? Where's the state of California? Are they suing? What's happening there? Where are you in court?
So the state level is all going to be put back into the county which we've lost the state. So now we're appealing to the federal court with Jay Sekulow, who's now helping take this on. But if we lose and the Supreme Court says we're not going to take it of the United States, then it will go back down to the county. Then we'll have to pay the fines. And, the whole thing's been 5 years, and they purposely said this to us early on. The county says, we're just going to wear you out. We're just going to attack you.
Did they actually say, is that a quote?
They did. They told us, look, we have more money. We have more lawyers.
Disgusting.
And the money isn't even theirs. It's the taxpayers' money.
This is authoritarian government tyranny. That's what this is. It's totally unjustified. I mean, and the fact that it's still going, my goodness. I mean, talk about the cost in terms of the process. Of course, you rightly, I mean, we're 100% with you, shouldn't pay these completely unjustified fines. But you've paid a lot. Time, money, lawyers, talk about that for a little bit.
There's good and bad in all of it, I think. To me, I as a pastor, my heart is for people. I love this country. The founders, 27 of them were pastors just like me. They understood. And we have a culture who doesn't really understand the freedoms that we've been given. And they're listening to the narratives from the media. They're put in fear. And I just think of early Americans, they didn't live in fear. They fear God. They didn't fear death. And so when you have people who don't understand really the foundation of the country, then that's the cost. To me, it's what's hurting our country and hurting California is not just all of the financial fraud or the election fraud. It's really the lies that we don't know that God actually cares about us and can heal us and save us, and we don't have to fear death. that's a big thing. But what's happened during COVID is we have literally had over 2,000 people baptized. So during all of this, people were so afraid, they started thinking about their mortality and they started thinking about life and death, which was, to me, that's good. But I also think the First Amendment, our country is at stake. And so the cost isn't so much the money. It isn't really that to me at all. It's really about, it's a principle of the First Amendment. Like, what are we fighting for? What's the core? It's to believe however you want in America. You had the freedom to believe. And the founders, most of them were Christians. But you can come here, you had freedom to worship God. You had freedom of religion. That was what really was the core freedom in America, because you didn't have that in England. The king was in charge of the church as well as the state. But there's a separation of church and state, and it's been confused. And I think what's happening now is the state is trying to literally take over the church and dictate how we worship. I mean, when Newsom says you couldn't sing, I just thought that was the craziest thing. By the way, the church, we had a Christmas Eve service. We had over 3,000 people for the Christmas Eve service, and they never sang so loud. Like, people were like, they're not happy about this. And so that was good that people, I think, understood what's at stake. But if we're not paying attention, and I think that's what I'm more concerned about, the cost is my children, the next generation. If we don't hold on to the freedom that we've all enjoyed, and we see what they did in COVID, what are they going to do next? Like, what are they planning? And so that's the big cost.
Well, that's why I'm so proud to stand with you, and to shine a spotlight on it. And I just want to ask, what more can we do now? What do you need? How can people help you?
I think the best thing people could do is get informed. Don't be afraid. My heart is, obviously, that the gospel would go out, that people would understand who Christ is, what he's done for your life. I mean, this is what, again, our country in the early part during the revolution, they would shout, "No king but King Jesus." People wanted freedom to worship God and not have that dictated to them. But financially, and people have sent us money, but that's not what I want people to understand what we're up against. I want to get rid of the election fraud and just all the things that we need to expose. Jesus says, as Christians, we're supposed to be the light of the world. And so light exposes darkness and what's going on in darkness. And I think if people see things that are wrong, we need to speak up, and we need to expose the lies and the things that Newsom has done for so many years now. It just breaks my heart. I think it breaks God's heart. But the best thing you can do is pray for us, pray for our country, and that people wouldn't fear anyone but God. I just really think God wants to bless our country again. And he can do it. What united our country from people all over the world that gathered here, that came here for that freedom to worship as they want to worship, that the state had no control over the church. And you're coming to a country now, for those that are coming here, it's like you're going to lose this freedom that you thought was here, the American dream. It's going to be gone, because it was the freedom to believe as you want to believe and to worship who you want to worship. But they're coming and saying, no, you can't sing, you can't gather. We got to fear this disease. And, my grandfather was a doctor at the Mayo Clinic. And by the way, he warned me, and Jay Bhattacharya is a good friend of mine as well. And I talked to him about this at length. So they've been planning this hostile takeover through our medical institution for 100 years. As I said, my grandfather, he was a fellow at the Mayo Clinic. And he used to say this in the 80s, watch out, one day they're going to put a doctor with a coat on in charge of the country. And we used to think he was crazy. He said, you need to get out of the country, because they're gonna try to kill everybody. And we're like, what? How are they gonna try to kill everybody? But I think that's what we've seen. That's what they want to do. And if you don't fear God and you remove him from society, there's a vacuum that's going to be filled with evil and debauchery and the things that are taking over our culture now. So we really need to bring God back into the culture and the freedom for people to choose. It's not like you have to follow the church and do whatever we say. No, it's just let people believe in God, worship God, and don't dictate how we do that. I mean, that's a total violation of the First Amendment. But, that's what people could do. Pray for us and stand strong for these constitutional rights that we're going to lose.
Wonderfully said. I love everything. This has just been such an important conversation. We'll have many more. I've already spoken at an event at your church, and I'll be back proudly to support you. And one other thing I just want to mention, for my part, what I will be doing, I've made this commitment, I made it early on in my campaign for governor. We're not going to let them forget this or get away with it. And so I've announced that we will have a COVID Accountability Commission, and we're going to look into all of this that happened, with Newsom and this authoritarianism and this tyranny. Totally unjustified. And we're going to uncover all of it, make sure we don't forget, shine that light, and hold people accountable, because you can't do this to people and just get away with it. They have so far, but not when I'm governor. Pastor Mike, great to see you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
All right, that's our show for this week. Thank you very much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. Get involved in my campaign to save California. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com, and make sure you come back next week for the next episode of The Steve Hilton Show. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. See you soon, everyone.